Welcome to EdSource's first roundtable of 2024. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. More California superintendents are leaving their jobs than ever before. Some are moving on and taking other jobs, while others are retiring. Many point to the pandemic, politics, and stress as factors in this new wave of turnover. At today's roundtable, we'll talk about how superintendents' jobs have become so difficult and what can be done to attract them and help them navigate these politically charged times. Lastly, EdSource would like to thank the Stewart Foundation for making today's roundtable possible. Now, for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Carl Cohn, Professor Emeritus and Senior Research Fellow in the School of Educational Studies at Claremont Graduate University. He previously served as a California State Board of Education member, as well as a superintendent of Long Beach and San Diego school districts. Please also welcome Kathy Washer, who retired last year from Lodi Unified School District, where she served as superintendent for 15 years. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris Evans, former superintendent of Natomas Unified. I'd also like to give a special welcome to Vivian Echian, former superintendent of Glendale Unified, as well as a past deputy superintendent at LA Unified. And please also welcome Greg Franklin, who retired as superintendent of Tustin Unified School District after a 36-year career in schools and district administration. Our moderator today is EdSource reporter Diana Lambert. Diana, I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks so much, Ann, and thanks for all the panelists for being here today. I want to start off with Carl, and we can talk about his research on why superintendents are leaving, what's made the job so difficult.
Mid-March 2020, basically the pandemic started us on this journey. I actually wrote a piece for School Administrator magazine, and they titled it An Impossible Position. So no matter what we may have thought, superintendents became the public face of the pandemic. And in most instances, they were merely following public health dictates. But that sort of started this process with people grousing about, "You've disrupted my life," childcare, all of these issues. We saw in many places in California, groups coming up called Reopen such and such schools. So the pandemic started this, and then it was followed by the culture wars. So if you take a local pastor who declares that the public schools are the devil's playground, that's catchy and that's going to get attention. I sometimes say to my colleagues in higher ed, the real truth is people actually care about kids in K-12. And that's why these issues have become so important. And I don't think there's going to be any change in this until November of 2024 when we see some results. But right now in our state, people are pivoting toward recall elections. So March 5th, the Orange Unified recall is the first in the queue, and it's on the ballot. And then, of course, in our state, you have signature gathering for initiatives where groups are attempting to change state law to get their way on these issues.
Chris?
There's a lot I agree with, Carl. The national discord for politics and the way at the federal level government was treating each other has come to the local level in many cases. It's not just the divide, but it's how people are treating each other. In some cases, it's one political party challenging within its own political party. In other cases, as we see more frequently, the political parties across the aisle. And I think that's what's significantly different. We used to school boards, as superintendent, you knew what the ideology and the politics was of your board members, but mostly it was, it wasn't supposed to be a partisan election. That has clearly shifted in the last 3+ years, heading into 4 years now. And so you add in the politics, you add in the difficulties of the pandemics, Carl talked about the culture wars. And I think the final piece is new work and tasks keep getting added to school districts on an ongoing basis. So as we're dealing with all of these things, not just us, but our teachers, our classified employees, and our other managers are having to implement not just one, but often 2, 3, or 4 or more new things every year. And we're really not doing them as well as we should be when so many new things are coming on top of all the politics.
Kathy.
Thank you. Also like to add to that, another complicating factor has been the labor shortage. And I know that just didn't impact education alone, but it certainly had a negative and still does have a negative impact on education. And it's not just a teacher shortage. It's other areas as well, bus drivers, custodians, nutrition service workers. And when these positions, when it's hard to fill these positions, it's also hard to get substitutes to fill those positions when they're vacant. And then the positions that would be above those in supervisory or management roles, it's hard to fill because there aren't enough folks taking those jobs. So on top of all of what has been shared, you add a labor shortage and it just complicates the issues for education.
So how does this impact the superintendent shortage impact students, teachers, school staff?
There's lots and lots of research out there that talks about what's good for schools, teachers, and students. And one of the biggest factors is stability. In a stable environment, people can take risks because there are reliable boundaries about what I can and can't do. And those risks are what really lead to innovation. And so just like a turtle, when a turtle's scared, it pulls its neck in and it's not going anywhere. And I think that in our school system, we have a lot of heads pulled back into the shell right now because they're unsure about where the boundaries are and don't want to be the one that gets whacked.
I think in addition to that, it's harder to build social capital when there are recruitment and retention challenges because the support systems that we've built in the community are disrupted. And it's not so much impacting the students immediately, but if there are vacancies in classrooms, it certainly is noticed very quickly by the community, and then trust issues can arise that have not existed before, and it makes the school administrator's job much more difficult because they end up having to do everyone else's work. So there's definitely a negative impact when there are recruitment and retention challenges.
So let's talk about solutions. What can superintendents do to navigate politically charged school board meetings and issues? How do they refocus the board and community on educational issues?
One of the things the Hewlett Foundation is supporting a grant that myself and a Harvard colleague are taking on, and we're trying to answer the question, how should superintendent preparation, training, and support change to meet this moment? So we're convening superintendents, politics of education scholars, the associational interest groups to talk about what's working, and one of the things, apart from this, that I've become aware of is a group in Ohio in a place called Middletown, where the superintendent decided, I'm going to bring in the Ministerial Alliance, an interfaith group, to start talking about these issues around whether or not the public schools are doing the devil's bidding. And we find this in older communities where there is some sort of interfaith group. Some of the Southern California suburbs, individual churches are the dominant religious force. And so in places like Temecula and Chino, the pastors actually feel they're entitled to control the public schools. And so there isn't perhaps a history of an interfaith council or a ministerial alliance. But if you have that in your community, engaging people and talking about issues around separation of church and state, those kinds of things become absolutely critical and important. And I think part of the problem was in the post NCLB era, it was all about instructional leadership. And I think this whole issue around political skill and navigating political environments has been neglected. And I think part of what we're trying to answer with the Hewlett Grant is how should that change? And how should we be training and preparing superintendents today that it's not all about whether or not you're the best instructional leader, but how are you engaging with communities? How are you broadening the perspective as the leader of that system?
Completely agree. Thank you, Carl. I also think that something that could be a solution would be once that someone is in the superintendent position, to have someone in a like position that they can call on, even if it's just to touch base, to troubleshoot, to run something by. I was a superintendent for 20 years, and from year 1 to year 20, there were times when I needed someone to be a sounding board or even to give advice as a mentor. So for new superintendents, a dedicated mentor, someone who's in the position in a similar type of district, someone who's a veteran superintendent, to have someone there that they trust, that they can count on to run things by as a sounding board, as a chat buddy. There are things that a superintendent can't talk with someone in their own district. It just isn't appropriate. There needs to be somebody who has a like job, who has that experience for both new superintendents and veteran superintendents. So I think a support system with a strong mentorship program and networking would be a good solution.
And one of the things we have noticed in our experience is that it doesn't always have to be another superintendent. So building cross-sector solutions with communities and community members to solve not just academic, but resource equity, enrollment challenges. We have to look at the superintendency beyond the individuals that necessarily are in the same field, but really tap into resources above and beyond. That could be very helpful.
I agree. Definitely superintendents, everyone should have a coach, but definitely superintendents could utilize one. For sure, when Carl had mentioned most, I would tell you, I think most educators, not all, but most come from the ed services world, instruction, teaching and learning. So I think it's time to put some intense statewide training in that helps them not only understand the politics, but to come back to facilities. If you're a declining district, how are you going to address that? If you're a growing district, you're now spending millions or hundreds of millions of the taxpayers' dollars on construction. All of those things need some more detailed training. And with school boards, there's been a lack of governance work. I know school boards are trying governance out there. It's harder with the political divide. So some kind of continued commitment to that, whether it's CSBA and or the state, encouraging that to come forward, I think would be extraordinarily important, even though it's challenging. And at the same time, once school boards start to resume governance, they can also put in place their own succession planning, which is very hard in these day and age with the politics, but offering annual opportunities for members of the public who might consider running for a school board to come in and understand what the job's really about. Board members, candidates are being tapped to step into political roles. And then when they step into it, they're extraordinarily frustrated because they see it doesn't really match like a city council or a county supervisor or roles that they have seen on TV or experienced elsewhere.
If I can build on what Chris has just said, I agree with him 100% about the ed services personality type that comes into the superintendent. Generally has a very high emotional intelligence. We know how to work with people. We know how to listen. We solve and come to compromises about difference in our interests. And we're used to that. This new idea, though, where people are coming in with a set agenda and not interested in a conversation and not interested in reaching an understanding, it's much more political science than it is social science. And so I think I teach now at the University of Southern California, and we have retooled many of our courses in preparing superintendents to talk about politics and political strategy. And in the case of Tustin, where I was, we had a recall effort before I retired. And after coming to the conclusion that the folks were just going to do what they wanted to do, our strategy was focus on our message. What is it that we're doing and why? And then we just put that on repeat. And the recall effort didn't collect enough signatures to actually reach a ballot. And we recognized that it was a little messy, a little painful, kind of distracting, but it's a process available to citizens and our voters. They did what they wanted to do, and we continued to focus on kids teaching and learning. And it did work out in the end, but you have to be ready to stay that course.
Also, the idea that we can find common ground with individuals that appear to be polarized is not one that's easily accomplished. But there are ways in which we can do that. And whether it's at the university level or through networks of superintendents, when we talk about kids, there's always something we can find in common as a starting point so that we break down the polarized community spirit and bring them back into the dialogue that matters most, which is the well-being of our kids.
I wanted to jump in with a question from the audience regarding multilingual education. As we all know, California has some very ambitious goals around bilingual and multilingual education. And, and this is open to anyone on the panel. How are superintendents advocating or, championing for those types of changes? And is it one of those really difficult issues that are, to navigate in the district?
Well, having had 7 languages in Glendale, I can speak to the fact that it is time consuming and very important to redirect resources to make that happen. But at the same time, with all the research around students and learning and the advantages of being multilingual, I think it's a missed opportunity if we don't attempt it. And at the same time, as we are now looking at funding for arts, we can't look at multilingual always about languages. Arts could be the second language for our school district because that really transfers thinking, brings people together. There's empathy involved, and there are many different ways in which our students can express themselves. And it's a huge opportunity to give access for equity for our students. So the perspective on multilingual can be the very conservative. You have another language introduced that you pursue throughout TK-12, and then there can be one that builds into the arts, builds into truly the growth mindset that our students deserve to be respected for.
In my experience in working with school boards, it's been about choices for students, and that's always been a priority for at least the boards that I have worked with. And so the multilingual program fits right into providing those options for students, giving them as much access as possible that we can give them, whether it's language, career tech, other kinds of opportunities. So it's about giving students those choices and those opportunities that will help them grow and expand and make choices in the future. Again, a lot of it does come down to staffing and who is going to run those programs.
I think that in some ways, when there's a clash over language instruction and whether you're teaching in a student's first language, it has to do similarly with gender issues and racial issues, where somebody is threatened that one group of kids is getting attention or information or resources that maybe not every kid is getting. And I think there's some distrust about what the source of that motivation is by the school system. So I think to be really clear that our students achieve academically and they grow cognitively, the more safe and secure they feel, the sense of belonging that they have at their campus, the relationships they have with adults. And so if you're going to make all students of all races, all gender identities, all languages feel welcome, you need to have a pretty broad, welcoming culture at your school. And I think, in my experience, that's where a lot of the conflict derives from. And so we have to be really clear on why we're doing what we're doing, right? That it's in the interest of our students' cognitive and social development that we be open and welcoming and embrace every student.
Well, what can school boards do to attract and retain superintendents?
I think to provide support and to make it very well known to candidates that there is a support system for the superintendent. I think that being a board that supports and praises in public and expresses concerns in private is also something that would attract someone to the position. If people are looking at school board meetings online or they're in person and they're seeing how a board is treating a superintendent, that could be very distracting in terms of whether someone is even interested in working for that governance team. And it's all about building a strong governance team. So a board that is supportive, very clear with expectations, very focused on students and student outcome and student achievement as their priority, strong vision and mission, and ready to support the superintendent as they carry out the goals and directions of the board.
I think it all starts with trust and building trusting relationships. And at the same time, it's important to determine the responsibilities clearly defined for the superintendent and those that the board really should be carrying. And I think it's important to communicate that out so that it's clear also to larger audiences, so that it's not a secret of who's actually doing the work and who is in charge. And the role of the board is clearly defined, but also the superintendent is supported publicly in the best of times and also in the most politically charged elements that we see sometimes.
Chris?
So everything's changed from the perspective that many, if not nearly all of the board meetings are recorded, many of them live streamed. So boards need to be mindful of how they interact with each other, how they interact with staff and the superintendent, because people watch. Maybe not necessarily live. I mean, there's not like thousands of viewers each night that there's a board meeting. But when candidates do take a look, they do pick board meetings, and they watch board meetings, and they see how the superintendent interacts with the board, vice versa, how the board interacts with the staff. It's a new window, by new I mean the last few years, into a district's culture and its governance culture that didn't exist prior. And so it allows candidates, if they want to do research, a new avenue to take a look, and boards just need to be extraordinarily mindful of that.
And I would add that AXA and CSBA probably need to get closer. I was at a meeting in Sacramento last fall. Vernon Billy, the executive director of CSBA, gave some extraordinary percentage on the number of new school board members in California since November of 2022. It might have been 30-some%. And so part of this is a closer connection and a dialogue between these two major associational interest groups. We've seen a board in Orange County publicly withdraw from CSBA, that kind of thing, arguing that CSBA is too liberal. I moderated 2 panels at the CSBA conference in San Francisco in December, standing room only, raucous gatherings with the political divide very present in the room. And I had higher ed presenters, and at one point you could sort of see some members of the audience were getting impatient with these woke higher ed types presenting their research. So anybody who thinks that California is this special place that somehow isn't a part of this national partisan divide. It really is front and center. So I think we need to spend more time on these issues of who are the good people who can facilitate dialogue across interest groups. I think it's really important.
Carl, your point is so on target, I think. California hasn't elected a statewide Republican for a statewide office since 2006. And we have lots of examples of Republican folks in the legislature who are, just feeling powerless because they can't get anything past the Democratic majority. Yep. And their stated strategy is to take it to the local communities. And so the reason we're seeing so much activity, political activity at the school board meetings is because as a group, the Republicans are unsuccessful in being able to break through the Democratic wall in Sacramento. So I think that's a big contributor. Your other issue, I think, that I want to highlight is when you're talking about board relationships, most superintendents have a very good board relationship with the board that hires them. The issue, as Carl's saying, you have all these new board members. And so I think part of the issue is how do you rebuild the leadership team and the governance team? Kathy talked about that term. The governance team really is the superintendent and the board together govern the school district. And if they're out of whack with one another, it gets sideways very, very quickly. And so one of the challenges, I think, AXA and CSBA are the right place to go, is how do you bring on board these new board members so that they understand what the roles of that they're stepping into, what the role of the board, what the role of individual board members is, as well as the superintendent, so that they can try and work in service of children.
We're getting a lot of questions from the audience, so I'm going to try to go through a few here. First one, again, to the whole group. How has the relationship between labor and management played a role in the decision-making, in your decision-making as superintendents, and how might it play in finding new superintendents?
I think most of us, every decision we make as a school superintendent, we have to account for the people who are going to enact the work. And our certificated and classified staff members do the work of the school district. It's the teachers who are in the classrooms. It's the folks who prepare the campuses, prepare the food, get the students to and from school. And so the school district doesn't work without that group being on board with the major decisions that are happening in the school district. They're crucial. And so I think as far as whether you take a job or not, a lot of us go to places maybe where the labor management relationship may not have been so good. If you have confidence in your ability to build those relationships and try and heal the organization so that everybody can, again, get back to servicing our students.
Anyone else have thoughts? Want to chime in on that issue?
I think communication is super important, as we often face challenges, unexpected ones. The problem-solving process includes all community stakeholders, and in that, the voice of labor is certainly incredibly important, but all labor groups aren't one and the same. So we have to really be able to personalize, individualize the relationship based on what matters to them as well. And then look at resources available and how we can build on that. Changes in policy, going to the state level. If we're in it together, it's not just on the superintendent and the cabinet to be the problem solvers, but labor voices resonate well in Sacramento. So to be able to come up with a win-win solution and work towards that is generally very successful.
Whenever I'm working with superintendents, I always mention the fact that when it comes to the future of public education in California, labor is going to be a strong ally. And as we look at what's going on with regard to the recalls, with regard to the signature gathering, labor is going to be a strong ally. And the truth is that some of the evangelical churches that I'm covering would be absolutely fine with creating so much conflict and chaos in the public school system that everybody throws up their hands and at long last says, bring on that full-blown choice voucher. We're going to run our own schools. We're going to take the state money and do that. So I'm constantly reminding people that labor is going to be a strong ally when it comes to the future of public ed.
There's just great opportunity right now as these challenges are being faced for, I think, superintendents and management and labor to come together. I worry about the next year or two as the budget looks to be turning south. I don't think there's enough experience in superintendents, chief business officers, school boards. You heard how many were potentially new in just a few years. So many folks are saying, is the state really going to cut us? Because they've never actually experienced it. And so while there's this great opportunity to build this once in a generation relationship with labor, we're going to have to get out in front and help leaders with the budget cut process, because it's going to go from every 2 to 3 years or every year, depending on your negotiation cycle, getting at least the cost of living or something more, to the real potential that layoffs and cuts could be in place the next few years.
And we've always had the why and how behind our decisions to retire or resign, but this is an opportunity, as Chris said, to step back in, not as a superintendent, but to be able to step back in to support those who are in those roles right now, so that they can access our experience on demand when necessary.
Speaking of budgets, which Chris mentioned, there was a question around the declines in enrollment. How are superintendents addressing that? And in your experience, was that top of mind? And how is that going to kind of shape the priorities of superintendents coming in?
There are definitely shifts. Yeah, there are shifts in enrollment, and I'll go after Kathy.
That's okay. Continue.
And they have to be watched. Sometimes they're new to the system. Sometimes it's due to the cost of living in a particular area, but the redirection of resources and the attractiveness of programs. So we have to remain globally competitive in terms of what we offer to our students and communities, and be aware and a good listener of what the parents and community members want. We had an actual increase this last year, even though we had a drop during the pandemic, and it was specifically as a result of communication of programs that were successful and how we were able to meet the needs of students coming in. And really the onboarding process for students changed, and the use of technology. I know many have different opinions on AI, but we were able to incorporate the use of AI very effectively in communication with parents and students that came at different levels of literacy. So it's another huge set of responsibilities, but it can be done.
Kathy?
Thank you. I'd like to add that in addition to the obvious budget concerns that declining enrollment brings to a superintendent and board, there's also the impact it has on families, students, and the community, because you're going to start talking about closing schools. You may start talking about changing attendance boundaries to readjust to be able to utilize facilities more effectively. Those two issues weigh heavy on a community's heart and soul. Schools are very near and dear to folks in the local community, especially if you have an older school, a country school. Grandma and grandpa went to this school. It can be very devastating to families to hear the word closure or redistricting of attendance boundaries. So those are issues that a superintendent and board have to navigate with declining enrollment, in addition to what they're dealing with the budget.
The last three questions actually tie really well to the complexity of the job as a superintendent, right? Budget cuts, labor relations, and then declining enrollment, which many districts are facing. It ties back to a really unfortunate way to lose trust with your labor partners, though, is when you're declining enrollment or the budget shrinks, and you superintendents and new chief business officers and cabinet members and board members have to really understand the layoff process, the budget reduction process. You could alienate staff very quickly. You can alienate the community very quickly. You just heard descriptions about boundary shifts. If you ever had boundary shifts meetings, those are the meetings where everyone shows up, right? The gym or the MP room will be full when you're trying to move a boundary. So I do believe we had a pre-meeting and Vivian talked about like getting back into it. And at first I thought, oh my Lord, we all went silent about getting back into it. I now understand what she means better. I think it's a great opportunity for retirees like us to get back in and help superintendents and chief business officers and cabinets and boards who just who haven't gone through the budget reduction and the times they're going to face, to be those coaches and mentors and help them manage what we all have done multiple times. And probably is why we all retired, and some of us retired early, right? It's exhaustive to do that kind of work and lift that with all the complexities of the job.
On the flip side of the declining enrollment, which is a trend in our state. So it used to be that we would all advertise our programs and be as innovative as possible to try and attract students, whether they were students in our community who might have been going to private schools and we wanted to get them back into the public schools, or even students in other communities and have them choose our district. But at this point, everybody's declining, with little exceptions here and there. The U-Hauls are only going one direction from California, and it's east. So, people are moving out of our state, and the birth rate's down as well. So that's going to stick around a while. And I would just say that while it's very, very challenging financially, it also leads to a great deal of innovation with online schooling, distance schooling, consolidation of programs and schools. And so while we're doing the hard budget work, there's also an opportunity to try and think about how do we deliver instruction to our students in new and innovative ways.
Actually, I think in many settings, the decline in enrollment sometimes has been an increase in diversity. So if we always focus on our growth and our ability to bring in what we haven't had, it might actually be long-term an aspirational goal of what we've been looking for. A public system that is more inclusive and provides access to students historically marginalized. So it's always about your outlook of what you can control and what you cannot, and how you use your resources to give every student the opportunity to meet their aspirational goals. And I think the support of community colleges, the ability to really partner with non-traditional settings, hospitals, everyone around us that has a car in the race to make sure that our next workforce is ready, prepared, and happy, is a conversation we have to continue to have in our larger community. And for that, you need a communication machine. It's not something that can ever stop. You can never over communicate.
And one of the big groups we communicate with, as it's been said before, is our labor partners. And that's just an ongoing relationship that is so important that we know the way to damage any relationship is to hold back information. And so it's really important that we continue to be transparent about what the challenges are and ways that labor can partner with us to solve problems. And we have lots of examples of that happening in the past. During the Great Recession, 2008 and 2009, most districts had to lay off staff, and employees agreed to taking fewer work days. We referred to them as furlough days. And so their salaries were reduced commensurate with the days less that they worked. And most of us who were superintendents at that time doing that bargaining process, we had a higher percentage of vote yes by our employees in their contract votes than when we were giving them raises. So the labor really comes together in a crisis, and we could not have furloughed our employees without their participation. Similarly, when we had the COVID, and we had to go to online and figure out what that was going to look like. And then we had to come back and we had to figure out what that looked like, because we were opening schools and we're supposed to have 6 feet on either side of every student inside a classroom. And so we had teachers who were teaching to kids in front of them. They also had a group they were teaching to online. The teachers were champions. The faculty made that work to the best of their ability. And it was just a marvel to watch. So I just, sometimes we talk about associations and there's some frustration, but just like Carl said, they're going to be the answer to almost any solution that's going to help us move forward. And so we have to really embrace that.
One of the things we found in terms of jump-starting what was a beginning of a slight enrollment decline in San Diego. I think San Diego had about 120,000 students when I was there. But one of the things we found out was that parents absolutely love K-8 schools. And so where this can be sort of a overall difficult conversation, if you can find something that parents actually like, being in the same place from kindergarten through 8th grade, they jumped on board with that. So this can be an opportunity to go bold or to innovate.
Now we've talked about the need for mentorship and support for new superintendents, but are there any support systems in place right now?
Yeah, we've talked about AXA, the Association of California School Administrators. It's the administrative group that represents California schools, and we train superintendent aspirants. So I run one of the academies for folks who want to be a superintendent in the future, and then they stay together in that cohort. There's about 28 in my academy, and the feelings that they have for each other of support and taking care of one another is pretty strong. I participated in an academy before I was a superintendent. I think many of us probably did. And so you have those kinds of cohorts, which are natural formed alliances. Also through the university preparation programs, people have some connections. And in my experience, those kind of connections that are more organic and are developed over time because of interest and location are stronger than the ones where we try to formalize and assign somebody a mentor, where that can feel a little bit artificial. And in my experience, has not been as successful as giving up people a space and a time to connect and take advantage of each other's expertise.
I think it's really important for incoming superintendents to review their contracts well and have an option to have a coach built into the contract so that the resources are available. Obviously, it's not a must-do if someone doesn't want it, but I think we grow every day in every position we have. So there's no start and end point, but being savvy about your own contract and having resources set aside to receive that formal support is something that our superintendents should be encouraged to do.
I think also that county offices can serve as facilitators for networks for supporting superintendents. It's kind of a natural group, often dealing with similar issues locally, and often meet together on a regular basis anyway. So there's opportunities to form connections and relationships, and a county office can certainly help navigate that especially when there's something coming, like COVID, where it's new for everybody, and provide that support. But even during the times when that isn't, there isn't a different and new challenge, but just to provide that support, I think that county offices can serve to facilitate that as well.
And if you really want to go into greater detail, I think female superintendents, I was the first female superintendent in Glendale. I can share with you that I'm sure that was different than somebody else's experience. There should be affinity groups as well, because I do see many female superintendents leaving their positions. And the way the community members approach, or even labor approaches, a female superintendent, even today, while there aren't that many, is different. So these are barriers that need to be recognized and spoken about and addressed. And affinity groups would be probably one option.
Vivian, there was a question in the audience, just piggybacking on the issue of more representation amongst superintendents and how to coach boards to see women in these positions, people of color in these positions. So curious to open it up to the panelists. One, do you see that need continue to grow? And if so, what do you think can be done about it?
I think it starts with the search and who is doing the search and how that search is approached. Women will often not apply for a position. There's research out there, not just the superintendent position, but any position, unless they feel that they meet 100% of the qualifications or what is listed on the job description, where that is different for men. So getting that support network even started before the superintendency, those who are in leadership positions, who are thinking about a superintendent position or thinking about moving up, encouraging and supporting women who are in middle management to seek those opportunities and to apply for those, how the search firms go about recruiting, who they're contacting, who they're encouraging, who is on the search committee, and how they're seeing female leaders in other positions, and getting them to even apply sometimes is a barrier. And then once the applications are in, having that consultant, if there is one, working with the board on how to review the applications in a fair and equitable manner.
Actually, I was recently reading an article by Joe Williams, published January 10th, and the title is "Where Have the Black Superintendents Gone?" And it speaks about all the different challenges of even the recruitment process, but also the ability to receive support on the job. So I think distributing research, talking about it, elevating the importance of diversity in cabinet positions is everyone's responsibility. It's not just those that are in a position to offer the position. And it starts from a teacher level, the recruitment and the leadership opportunities that present themselves even as a teacher.
On a hopeful note, I've spoken with 36 first-year superintendents at AXA's cohort, and then a Future Superintendents Institute down in San Diego, sponsored by the University of San Diego, and I've come away very impressed with a new group of talented, largely people of color, who are, with all the challenges we've been talking about, are embracing the superintendency. So I'm hopeful. Obviously, these folks are going to need support, but despite what's out there, I'm feeling good about where we are. One of the things to recognize, though, with regard to women, some of these school districts that are being taken over by evangelical churches, women leaders, when you view and understand these patriarchal systems that drive some of these churches, the notion of women is very much a backward notion. And that, the church that has taken over the fourth largest school district in Riverside County, you can go on that website and you will actually see video of the pastor talking about a woman's purpose in life is to find a godly male patriot to take care of her and the boatload of children that she's going to have. So I think going in, we need to understand that some of these places are being driven by a new kind of leadership that wants to take us back. And the most gratifying thing for me, actually being at these school board meetings, is what students come to the microphone and actually say about no going back, and that they're ready. They don't want their education watered down. They don't want books removed, that they are ready to embrace the future, and they do not have any problems with their fellow students who may be different from them. So I'm encouraged.
Well, we don't want to let you go without you giving some advice to the new superintendent. So what advice would you give someone starting the job?
I would say find the joy, because this is a joyful job. We've talked a lot about the challenges and what gets us down, but being a superintendent is the best job I've ever had, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. When you are a part of seeing children learn how to read for the first time, bringing in new programs to a school district, watching a community come together over an issue, working with the school board, find your joy and stay with that joy, whatever that may be. And the most important thing, I think, in being successful in this job is the relationship with the school board. And if you have a strong, trusting relationship with your school board members, they will stand by you and they will back you and they will make it a joyful job.
I'd like to say that through your actions every day, you set a trajectory for tomorrow. So as long as it focused your why and why you took the job, you will enjoy every moment of it. And sustaining your lived experience and building that organizational culture with your team will get you through the most difficult of times. So remain hopeful.
I would say stay focused on students and then build relationships with your board and everyone else in your community, because that's really the only way you're going to be able to stay focused on what students get, is have those positive relationships. So if you're not leading if no one's following. So making sure that the community is with you because of your relationships. In the end, that's what's best for our kids.
I have a variation of all of these themes that we've heard. That's such an important thing, to know why you're involved in the work you're involved in, and being able to serve families and faculty and staff is just a real joy and privilege. And so if you keep that in mind and then find like-minded friends, colleagues that you can have a support network, you're going to be great.
I was trained as a school counselor, and everything that I learned about how to listening helped me in all of the difficult situations that I was in as a superintendent. So I would argue, listen, and keep listening.
And let me offer one more rapid fire question to close our wonderful hour session off. A question from the audience: how can we support superintendents against just plain old burnout?
People come to board meetings when they're unhappy, generally speaking, or they communicate with the superintendent when they're unhappy. Very rarely do we get an unsolicited kind of a attaboy, we're really pleased with our school or this program. And so I would say communicate, be a balance. So if things are going well for you, also show up to school board meetings, because otherwise it sounds very, very one-sided.
I think there are bystanders who care deeply, but maybe have not built the courage to speak up. So I encourage those that remain silently or appalled to step forward and let their voices be heard.
I would say find out information for yourself before making a judgment or forming an opinion. A lot of the social media activity that happens around schools and school districts is very far from the truth and is contorted and contrived for various reasons. So if there is a concern, something that's bothering you, an issue, seek the truth yourself before coming to a conclusion. You may find that it is very different than what you hear.
I think variations of multiple of those: assume the positive, share when things are going well, and then get engaged to either support the things you think are going well or to change the things you think need to be better for your students.
I think we need to think boldly about how to give superintendents a break. This is not well publicized, but the Long Beach School Board gave me a summer sabbatical when I was 8 years into the job, and I ended up doing 10. And they said, go off with your family wherever you want. The deputy will run the school system and come back refreshed. And that's what I did. We went to Australia and Fiji and came back refreshed. And so I think we need to think and go bold around things that would keep successful superintendents in the job longer.
Well, that's a wonderful way to end this great conversation. I want to thank each and every one of you on our panel for taking the time out of your day to talk about this really important topic. Diana, for a wonderful moderation. Everyone in the audience, we continue to get and receive great questions. And so thank you for those thoughtful questions. Thanks again to the Stewart Foundation for making today's conversation possible. Everyone have a wonderful day.